Okay, welcome to CDR Online Series. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tony Wachiku, and for the next 60 minutes or so, we are here with the one and only Mr. Mitch. Give it up for Mr. Mitch.
Hey.
Give it up for Mr. Mitch. Yes, how you doing, man? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, sir. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who are new to CDR Online Series, this is a series that we've run during the pandemic. Usually CDR sessions are with human beings in physical spaces where we're able to interact as human beings. But under the pandemic, supported by the Arts Council, we were able to bring sessions online. And we're joined for the last one in this series. Penultimate one, I should say, with Mr. Mitch. If you have any pressing questions or thoughts on what you're hearing, please push them in the chat. So without further ado, thank you again, Mr. Mitch, for joining us. I've just got a few questions for you, really. I'm really curious. So, what was the inspiration that actually got you into music production?
A couple things, really. Like, my dad was a musician. He used to be like a session guitarist with Ariwa, and like Mad Professor. So he's got kind of history in dub music, but he also had a lovers rock group that he used to make music with on the label as well, and on other labels. But he kind of gave that up when I was a young kid and stuff. But music was always around me and always in the house. But I think the point where I actually wanted to get into music production was I got hip hop EJ from a cereal box, which is just putting together loops and everything. That was when I was about 12 years old, and I was like, this is incredible. And my cousin, he had a copy of Fruity Loops, and he managed to get me a cracked copy. And I think it was even on a floppy disk. It couldn't have been, but I remember I used to save all my files on the floppy disk. And just 12, 13 years old, I got a copy of Fruity Loops, and it was just from there that I was just hooked.
Hooked indeed.
Yeah.
So what kind of music were you making when you first, got into it?
Kind of like garagey kind of stuff, I guess. Like, it was kind of at the point where the crossroads of garage and grime, I think, and so the sound kind of reflected that a little bit. I think I was calling it garage at the time, probably. So yeah, whatever it was, it didn't really sound like garage as we know it, but that's what I was calling it.
Got you. And would you say that looking back then, it seems to me that you obviously you were excited by the technological advances that you were able to, with this, software that you had, and you were able to make music of your own, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think you were influenced by, your dad's past at all? I mean, he may have had some kind of guitars lurking in the background. Did you ever feel to kind of, maybe utilize the instruments that he had lying around and incorporating it into your music back then?
Not back then. He tried a few times to teach me the guitar, and I just couldn't get with it. I had keyboard lessons as well. I had my own keyboard that my parents bought me for like my 8th birthday or something, and I had a few keyboard lessons, but we got rid of the instructor after he swore, when he started swearing at me when I got things wrong. So my parents got rid of him, and then I just never exactly, and then I just never got another one again after that. So I kind of had a couple opportunities to learn how to play music and stuff, but it just never really took it anywhere. But I think my dad's influence was definitely there, but not necessarily. I don't think it was conscious at the time.
Mm. Okay. So at what point did you, want to take, the whole music production career thing seriously?
I think it was sometime around 2008. Mm-hmm. So it was quite a few years after I initially started making music. I think I was like 18. I'd just gone to university to do a media production degree. So it was like photography and video and stuff, and I was 1 year into it, and I was enjoying it a bit, but I kind of never had considered doing music. I'd been making music all this time and not really sharing it with that many people, and but I'd always believed that I was good, kind of thing. But
Hmm.
I never really thought that it could be a possibility that could be a thing, a career for me, or a way to make actual money. Kind of my ambition when I was a teenager up to that was just to get people to know me in Lewisham, basically. Like, yeah, because
You want to
that
represent your ends, basically.
exactly, yeah,
That was
that's what it was.
that was, yeah.
It was very small scale, and there's just that to be known is like the only thing I wanted really. Um, but then yeah, I guess going to university and kind of getting exposed to other industries and other ways of doing things, I just thought, oh, why don't I just try and do this properly? And I dropped out after the first year, and I just went to study music. First of all, I went to the Point Blank
Yeah.
college and spent like a lot of money on one 3-month course, but which helped me because I learned Logic, and before that I was just using Fruity Loops and Reason.
Mhm.
Um, and then after that, I went on to ACM, Academy of Contemporary Music in Guildford, and just did a music production course there. I felt like even though I'd had all these years of experience making music, it was all self-taught, and it wasn't even the time where you'd go on YouTube and look up tutorials that way. So I felt like I had no real knowledge. That's what I felt like at the time anyway. I felt like
Mhm.
I couldn't stand up next to someone and call myself a producer because I didn't technically know anything. So I felt like I needed to do these courses to kind of just help me.
Get
Make
you,
me
yeah, I guess give you a foundation, right? Do you know what I mean? Some
yeah,
kind of context, kind of historic context to what you're doing.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, no, I've got you. I really get where you're coming from there. I guess being if if something's your passion and it's something that as you said earlier, it's about just making music to be identified in your local community. At some in some respects, you may have thought that you were not necessarily winging it, but do you know what I mean? But you're just doing it. Whatever came to your head was good enough. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess by going to university, by and to Point Blank, you can almost contextualize some of the things that you're very passionate about and almost give it some kind of roots and foundation, which I'm sure was pretty useful.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us how your music production setup has evolved in that time. Obviously it sounds to me that getting Fruity Loops and perhaps Reason was almost like the beginning. Obviously, after you're a kid, obviously, but definitely it feels to me that you went this kind of Fruity Loops vibe, and then you went to Reason, and then obviously when you went to uni, you got your Logic flex going on.
Yeah.
Apart from the software, what else were you using to make music?
So most of the time, up and before 2009, I was just using normal PC speakers
Hmm.
or like they were good PC speakers, but they were PC speakers. They weren't like monitors. I didn't even know that my dad was really into high-end hi-fi equipment, but that was kind of I always put that as that's listening and this is me just making music on the computer. There were two different things, so I never
Hmm.
kind of thought of, oh, I need a better speaker or anything like that. I didn't even know what a mixdown was, to be honest.
Hmm.
So that kind of stuff wasn't important to me. It was all about getting new plugins. Like I used to just download loads of plugins all the time and just like
Well,
go through all the presets and just having loads of different sounds. I think at that time was what was most important to me. Whereas now, while I actually still have the same monitors that I bought in 2009, which are just some KRKs,
mhm.
which aren't my favorite monitors at all, but I'm used to them, I think, and I know how they sound. Um, but other than that, I've got a couple of bits of hardware now. I still on Logic. I
Mhm.
still haven't used any other software to make music since I've moved to Logic. Um, but I use far less plugins now.
Okay.
Probably go between about 5 different plugins for the actual sounds, and then I just use a lot of different effects processors.
Okay.
Um, that's kind of my current way of making music. Yeah.
And your decision to refine your plugins, what was your thinking behind that?
I think there was a point when I was learning a bit from the dubstep guys, and they just seemed to like really know a certain plugin and get great sounds out of it. So then I was getting into a bit more into synthesis and trying to actually figure out what these different elements inside this synth actually do instead of just flicking through the presets. So then I end up finding a plugin that I really like, and then I just stay with it for a bit, and then I realize that I can actually make loads of sounds out of this one plugin, and it saves me from trying to flick through all these different plugins to just find the same sound that I could actually make in this one plugin I was already in. Cool. I think that's where it mainly came from.
Yeah. And what are your top fives?
Omnisphere is my top. My last album was pretty much 90% Omnisphere.
It's a meaty plugin, Spectrasonics, but Omnisphere, it's a meaty. It's great.
Yeah. I know it's sample based, but it's really powerful, and you can do a lot with it. I mean, there's definitely a lot of stuff in there that I hear the sounds and those other producers use and stuff like that, but you can really do a lot with those sounds and make them your own as well. So I'm really
it's really versatile, right? It's really, really versatile.
Yeah. You can do a lot with it. Otherwise, I use I use a few native instrument bits occasionally, and then I use the Machine Jam a lot. So I use the Machine plugin, and that's really good. That's really helped me recently with drums. Using the Machine Jam, it's got a step sequencer built in that kind of takes me back to my Fruity Loops days, and that's something that I miss from using Logic, is just a nice little step sequencer to just build beats. It just makes it so much more fun, and I think half of the reason why a lot of my music over the past few years doesn't have much drums is because I don't like building drums in Logic, and they always come out sounding a bit boring or lifeless, and just because of the way I'm forced to build them, and just having the Machine Jam really helped me, and it's probably why maybe the last year or so I'll have more club focused music.
Okay, nice one. So tell us about The Lion, the Bitch and the Bordeaux then.
Yeah, so this is a tune I made in 2013. This was, to put it into context, this was like around the time I started this club night called Boxed, which was instrumental grime club night, where we basically, me and these other three DJs, Slack, Logos and Oil Gang, we had kind of all these weird beats coming to us that were like grime, but in a different context, I guess, and but stuff that your traditional grime DJ isn't necessarily playing, and like stuff that I was making, I felt that fitted into that box as well. And I was like, I wish we could there was just a night where we could play these weird beats, and it started, and we had like 60 people to the first event, and then it grew over the years, where we was doing nice venues, and this was around the time that we started it, and I feel like 2013, 2014, there was so much experimentation within the grime sound that's kind of died out a little bit now, but it was really exciting, and this tune is one of the ones that was bubbling around at that time, and it's not grime per se, it's almost ambient and really melodic, but where I was coming from, I'd always considered myself as a grime producer, and so like even the everything that I approached at that time, I was doing it as, this is grime, but this is another type of grime. This is I was trying to make, in my head at the time, I was trying to make grime kind of like the way people look at house, where there's so many strands of house music and it could be like that, and I was trying to make grime that, basically, where this is more like an ambient version of grime. This is the same elements, the same energy,
got you,
the same thought process, but something different, I guess. But yeah,
let's dive in.
Cool.
Nice, 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 nice. So let's take a very minimal but really spatial. Really
Yeah.
lots of space.
Sorry.
Yeah, quite
Yeah.
hypnotic in a way.
Yeah, it's very, very minimal. Kind of not a lot going on here, but really is actually one of my favorite tracks that I've made, and one that I keep going back to. And I'm not. Yeah, this is the first time I've opened it in the project in a little while, and it's just looking at it, it's just like, wow, there's really not much going on here at all, is there? But yeah, it's just I really like it.
That's great. So before we delve into each track, can you take us back to your original thinking with this track? As you said before, a lot of your thinking was all about grime and having the attitude of grime and the aesthetic that grime producers have. But this track obviously is clearly, an ambient track, right?
Yeah.
So what was your thinking in terms of, creating this track and putting it on this EP that on the whole was about having this kind of grime sound?
Yeah. I think there was also, to put it into a bit more context, this is at that same time I created this EP called P Stubs, and that was at the time when a lot of grime producers were clashing each other and making war dubs for each other, and they were taking obviously elements from each other's music and putting it in their own and saying, look, I can make it better than you, kind of thing. And I tried to compete with that, and it didn't come naturally to me. And kind of the aggressive sound, which I have done in the past, kind of the aggressive grime sound, it's always been a bit forced and not really, doesn't really sit right with me personally, and just kind of it just doesn't come naturally. So I decided to make P Stubs, where I took elements of grime beats from grime beats that I liked, slowed them down, kind of deconstructed them, I guess, to their core elements, and it kind of helped me appreciate the subtle parts of grime tracks that I really liked, and it helped me kind of just see them with it at a different light, and that's kind of what led me to this EP, where everything was a bit more ambient and a bit more spaced out.
Nice and peaceful.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, a different emotion, a different context completely.
Yeah.
That's great. It's awesome. So yeah, let's go from the top now. So the first track.
Yeah. So up here we've got Omnisphere, which is just, I've got so within Omnisphere I've just got two different samples playing over each other. There's like I think it's like a recorded kind of animal sound that I've pitched up, and then there's this other like kind of FX noisy sound that I've just kind of, to give it a bit of texture on the track. This next one is Omnisphere again, and these are just the pads.
Nice.
Which
the sound, the side chaining there I can hear. Is that within Omnisphere, or is that
no? So that is here. I've got these kick drums kind of. I always, whenever I try, and quite a lot of my music, I add drums, and then I just don't like how they sound, so I just take them away. But this is the rhythm of the kick drums that I was going to use in the song, and I just sidechained it to the pads, and I quite liked the rhythm of it. So that's what I kept of the kick drum. So that like the kick drum is still there, but in negative form.
Got you. Yeah, the inverse of that. Yeah. Got you. Nice.
Next down. So these tracks here, I've only just bounced today because they're the same as these three tracks here, which is from Trillion, which I don't have on this new computer, but I have it on my old iMac, which definitely would have died if we tried to do this on there. So,
Trillion's a heavyweight. It's almost like Omnisphere's bass brother, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's great. It's an awesome program, really rich and deep.
Yeah.
It's great.
So these are just three basic sawtooths from Trillion that are put through the same side chain and yeah, just very minimal EQ on there. We've got and then the next layer is the higher pitch.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've just got the additional melody at the end, all going through the same sidechain, just so they kind of work together.
Got you. So it's almost like the pulsing, the bass and the pad are all pulsing together as one, right? It's almost like that.
Yeah.
Got you. No, it's a good idea. Great idea.
Cheers. And this is the actual kick that I kept with, just a simple. Oh, no, it's not the kick. This is kind of some percussive sound. It's called Trash Talker here, so kind of got a little sample delay on it, just to give it a bit of width.
Okay.
But yeah, very simple here, just a bit of compression and a bit of EQ.
So would you say, obviously you've placed these kick drums in, was that your style of creating beats back then? You talked a little about by using Machine Jam now.
Yeah.
But back then, was it all about just placing, drum sounds, as you're writing them in rather than programming them in?
Yeah, definitely. I would always start with melody. So like a lot of this track, probably we would have just done the whole melody first, and then I would have, and then kind of drums were, I guess, were almost like an afterthought, or just a way of trying to hold things together a bit more. I think some of the ways I approached drums in Logic came from the ways I was taught it in Point Blank and ACM, and kind of the teachers that we had there, they just kind of showed us dropping in the samples and building the drums like that, and it kind of it feels so I don't know how to put it. I think because of the way the grids work in Logic as well, they're not always perfect, and it just doesn't really work for me building drums like that, and it just takes such a long time, and I can never get the good rhythms that I like.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why I always used to approach drums very minimal in a very minimal sense back then.
It's interesting building rhythms, isn't it? Because I think, for me personally, building rhythms is a very tactile process. Whether I'm using a drum machine or using a machiner or using drum rack in Ableton. Do you know what I mean? I think there's something about creating rhythms. You can have obviously place samples on the timeline, of course, but I think particularly for rhythm elements, I get the sense of view as well, and why perhaps Machine Jam it really works nowadays, because there's this tactility to it. And as you said, using sequences, you've got almost like this call and response thing going on. When you place a note, you can hear it immediately. You can bring notes in and out, and it's much more physical, much more tactile, right?
Yeah. I've been using the Digitakt recently for building drums, and that's really helped as well. And I've recently put out an EP that I made with my sons. One of them's a 9-year-old, and he did a lot of the drum programming on that, just because the Digitakt because it's just right there in front of you, and you can just work through the different steps, and he just took to it really, really well. Whereas if I put him, even though he knows his way around the laptop, if I put him on the computer and told him to build a drum beat, it probably wouldn't come out as good, anywhere near as good. And I think it's just also the ability of just like pressing a few buttons, seeing how it sounds, and then taking some of those out and just messing around so much faster than placing waveforms everywhere. Is just such a long process and no fun. And then I think music making needs to be fun.
Yes, exactly. Maybe in this case with this track, it was almost made to be ambient. Do you know what I mean? Exactly. Because as you said, perhaps it was just if the drums were complicated, and you did spend that time doing it, it wouldn't be as it is now, which is very spacious and a lot more focus on the melodic elements rather than the drums being a main feature. It's almost like the drums are almost like accents in a way, right? So maybe for this it worked out for the best. Well, it did work out for this, obviously.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, on the other tracks, what else have we got? Yeah, very. See, nothing even. I haven't even put anything on the effects there. And this was also kind of the approach I was trying to do with my P stubs, where whereas the kind of the years between studying
Hmm.
and this point, I'd got, oh, I need to get the best mix downs. I need to make sure everything's the cleanest possible. And then I was thinking back to most of my favorite grind beats don't have the best mix down, and they have just pure energy and pure emotion.
Yeah,
And I feel like a lot of that was getting lost in me just trying to make everything super clean. So I kind of just took a step back and just thought, no, let me just make it how it sounds good, and if it sounds alright, just leave it, kind of thing.
that's really interesting. You should tell it. We'll touch on mixdowns a bit later on, actually, because I'd love to hear your take on that. But for sure, I think the mixdowns is always a kind of contentious subject, right? Do you know what I mean? And I think something that you just alluded to right now is that it's about feeling, right? So if the energy's there and the feeling is there, throughout history, records that have got energy, it's not necessarily about it being the cleanest, mastering process or the cleanest, the most well-produced track. It's a culmination of everything, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
The performances, the detail to the tracks, how it was made, etc., etc., and all these kind of qualities make it what it is, right? So I think definitely a lot of grime records, and indeed a lot of black music, it is about that, really, the energy and the spirit and the emotion and the soul in the track, as well as obviously the instrumentation, etc. So,
and people pay a lot of money to get plugins to make it have that gritty sound that people have just made by accident. So
yeah,
I don't. It's I think a lot of the teachers at ACM, I enjoyed my time there, but they kind of I think school in general was a bit kind of rock focused and maybe pop music focused, and they didn't really, some of the people there anyway, didn't understand dance music, and there was just, in general, dance music is badly mixed, isn't it? And it doesn't, they don't really know how to do mixdowns, and it's like they're kind of missing the point a bit. And it kind of made me think, oh right, well my mixdowns need to be better, and I need to do this, and it kind of spun me the wrong way a little bit in terms of what I was trying to do.
Yeah, I can really imagine that. I mean, I think that I think the thing to learn from your experience is that it's about application, right? Do you know what I mean? I think predominantly, if you're trying to make music that's radio focused, it has a particular sound to it, as opposed to a record that's for the dance floor, or a record that's for a sound system, or for So I think that's something to consider. I'm sure I mean, we can talk. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit more about this in detail. But I think it really depends on what role the mastering or the EQing or it plays. And there are definite times, and we've all got records in our collection, that if you're really going to critically analyze it from a sonic point of view, it'll be trash.
Yeah.
But that's not the point, because the record's fire, and that's what counts. And if the record's fire and it moves the dance floor and moves people, generates emotion, who's to say that it's it should be otherwise. And there's and throughout history, every day, these things are being are topics of debate and are questioned, for sure. Wicked. So yeah, take us through. There's a couple more elements, right?
Yeah, this one is kind of a subtle percussive sound, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then padding, knocking sound.
Yeah, barely there. That was an omnisphere again, just panned a little bit, and then the last one is vocal stabs that I use these quite a lot on tracks. These are taken from an a cappella of a track that I had to work some demos on before, so I don't really want to give away the vocalist. But I've got a few different bits that I just chop up and use and on a lot of different tracks. It just gives it a little bit more. I think just bringing in a touch of vocal just gives it that little bit more energy somehow. Even if what they're saying doesn't make any sense. It's just a human voice and a human element kind of changes it.
Oh,
So
for sure.
It's just going through a reverb and a tape delay. So very simple, but it just gives it a bit of depth as well.
And character, and kind of it brings it all together, doesn't it? You know, and as you said, it's almost like there's something really beautiful about just adding a vocal texture to a track. You know, it just instantly makes it. I guess it connects people more. You know, and also in a way, it kind of pays homage to, you know, vocal snippets in garage. You know what I mean? You know, or vocal snippets in kind of house records. You know what I mean? That kind of little vocal snippet that just keeps you connected, keeps you locked in.
And I think a lot of the music I was making as a young teen with Fruity Loops, and didn't have any access at the time. I didn't have much access to plugins when I was about 14, 15. A lot of the stuff me and my friends were making was sampling stuff, we would get MIDI tracks from video games and make a track that was just completely a rip-off of some video game music, but make it grimy, and then we'll just use like a square wave instead to make it just sound a bit grimy, and a lot of it was sampling. So we would just be downloading music from LimeWire and just putting it through the FL slicer and just playing out whatever, and I've got a lot of random samples that I was just find, like tunes that I guess when I watch documentaries about like early hip hop producers and way they went to the record shops and were proper digging for finding gems, and that there's not a lot that gets said about, actually we were doing the same thing, my generation, on LimeWire, but it was a different way of looking, and we would just type in, like, I don't even know can't remember what we were typing in, but we just find random stuff, or we go through someone's library and just find, oh, this tune sounds weird, let's put it in the slicer and see what happens. And there's just a lot of tunes that I was sampling. I had no idea what they were, but they sounded good when you put them with a beat. So
that's a really really good point. I mean, I think there's definitely something to be said about, you know, digital digging, right? Do you know what I mean? You know, and the fact that you were, you know, as you said, I mean, I think, you know, historically with hip hop digging in crates, that, you know, there's a whole, you know, generation of producers, DJs, producers who, you know, went to record shops, and, you know, there's a whole culture around that, right? Do you know what I mean? And I think definitely when Napster, LimeWire, all the kind of peer-to-peer technology became available, suddenly, you know, there's a whole raft of music that you've got access to, right? And I guess I'm assuming here for you guys, you know, for you and me to a certain extent, you know, there was so much out there. It's almost exciting just finding random pieces of music, and as you said, just by putting it into the slicer and then seeing what comes out the other end. It's almost like that's the excitement, right? Because it's kind of whatever gets spit out and gets chopped up and reorganized is the exciting part of it, you know, rather than it being this kind of really conscious finding this break, finding, you know, something about, no, for sure. I mean, that's a really interesting point. You've just, maybe we should do something about that. Maybe.
Maybe.
but it's interesting. Did you ever? I mean, do you miss? I'm going a little bit off tangent here, but I think it's all connected. I mean, do you miss the kind of you know, that way of making music? Or let me put it another way. Are you still influenced by you know, your early chopping, sample manipulation, slicing workflow that you had when you first started? Are you still incorporating that in your music now? And if you are, is it the same? Was it moved on? Is it evolved? How is it?
I definitely still do it. I've got a few tracks where I've sampled, and I still sample like really bait tunes and just try and get away with it, I guess. And I don't do it as much to the same degree where there was a point where every tune would start with me having a sample and then building around that. Whereas it's different than that now. But I definitely have like a notes list where I might hear something, or it's just one line in a song, and I'll just quickly write it down, and I'm like, you need to try and sample that. And so I'm a bit more methodical and less random, I guess, than I was when I was younger with my approach to sampling. and I put more context on things a little bit now, and I think that's partly from going to university where I used to do a lot of like Photoshop designing and stuff, like from people's MySpaces and all that kind of stuff, and I used to think I was good and I used to enjoy it, and then when you get there, they're like, but why is this good? And I was like, I don't really get the question, like.
Sure.
And then they taught me to, like, I never went to art galleries or anything like that before, so before that, so they taught me to kind of look at things in a different way and kind of put context,
analyze and contextualize.
Yeah,
totally.
Yeah, so it maybe that changed my approach to my music, or at least how I presented it to people. Even if kind of a lot of the time when I'm making music, it doesn't I'm not kind of putting this conscious thought into it, but at the end when it's made, I'm like, oh, this is linked to this somehow, or this makes me feel a certain way about this, and then it has a kind of link there. And so, yeah, I think with sampling is a bit more thought in going into it than just, oh, I like this, let me just play around.
Got you. But but it is fun though, as you said. I mean, I think there's definitely something about how we grow and evolve as artists and producers. And I think, I mean, for me personally, I particularly nowadays, I really enjoy remembering what it was like to sample something for the first time, and by pitching something down, it's how it changes, and it's really exciting. Or chopping up in a slice or recycle or whatever it was, and seeing what happens. And to me, I really try to remember that the things that really inspired me to be a producer, I still want to keep. I
like Melodyne a lot now. With my sampling, and just kind of that's when I discovered that they can you could like polyphonically change different elements of a song. You can just solo out like the violin and just change the notes, and that blew my mind completely. So then I was going in on songs and just changing the key of just like one little part of it, and just to see how it sounds. And so that's something I do more with my vocal manipulation. I might keep the whole singing part the same in terms of the structure, and then just change the notes within it, and so then it just becomes a new thing. And then I can build, because it's kind of slightly less recognizable, because just from changing a few notes within the song, you can build this whole new world around it, and that's a bit more exciting to me now with sampling.
Yeah, thank the Lord for Melodyne 5, eh?
Yeah.
So with this track, what's really nice about it is its simplicity, and as you said before, it's very ambient, very, it's almost like gets you as soon as you hear the first 5 seconds of it, you're kind of in already. Do you know what I mean? It takes you on this journey. I don't get the sense that there was anything particularly challenging about putting this track together. Was there at all?
No, no. I don't. I think this EP was put together really easily. There's 3 other tracks on it. They're a bit more. A bit more club focused, but like in my style, I guess. So it's still not really clubby, but this whole EP came to me really easy, and I think it was just at a time when there was so much exciting stuff happening, and the piece stubs really changed my way of thinking, and this just spilled out of me. So yeah, it was really easy.
So I'm really curious to your response to this. I mean, what are the characteristics of a grime track, and more importantly, a grime producer? What are the characteristics?
It's a question I can't really answer. I think a lot of the stuff that I may answer would definitely there's like a raw element to grime that comes from people experimenting, and it's the same. I didn't grow up listening to techno, and I didn't know much about techno until I got older. And
Hmm.
when I listen back to or watch documentaries and hear about how the young black guys from Detroit were approaching their music, it makes me feel like grime and techno are the same thing in
Hmm.
essence. And so it's just people just trying to push forward with a sound, and which is why I always called this stuff grime, because it's like it's just taking an element of what came before it and just going somewhere else with it. And that's what the young grime guys did with garage, and that's what I was trying to do with this. Like, this is the grime as you know it, but I've taken that little element and then just moved it into a different space.
Hmm.
And so I find it hard to pinpoint the individual elements like in words, because that's not my medium.
No, I hear that. I find it interesting because and a lot of the time it's a bit like, music I was involved with, when, for example, we grew up with, hip hop, the golden era, etc., etc. And then what was really interesting with music, that it didn't have MCs on it, it became something else. Some people called it trip hop, some people call it beats, instrumental beats or whatever. But there's almost like a different canvas and a different listening experience if the music isn't led by the vocalist, the rapper, the MC, or whatever.
Yeah.
So I find it really interesting that, and then for me personally, for a long time, what made grime for me was definitely the MCs, like the fact that it was about the vocalist, the music, the MC, and the relationship between the lyrics that are very representative and very much about, almost like contemporary folk music, and then the music almost like supported the lyrics. Do you know what I mean? So I find it really interesting that, for you, you've almost had a similar experience that I've had, in, albeit, a generation or so later, where, for you, it was about is the music production and the aesthetic and the sound of it is what you were drawn to.
Yeah.
And of course, you've of course worked with, vocalists, MCs, etc. But what you were more drawn to is the kind of rawness of the beats, and the fact that you had the courage to try different things out, and the fact that you've got this ambient track, and then for you, it's about the grime for you is about the approach that you've taken to the music making. Do you know what I mean? The rawness, the focus on, not necessarily simple in a, really refined elements. That's what makes it grime. And I think that's what obviously what connects. That connects grime. It connects hip hop. It connects techno. Just these really raw, very focused elements. And I think sometimes, getting back to your experience at, ACM, I think there's something to be said about, particularly with, digital black music. There's something that's very raw and in your face about it, regardless of what genre it is. And I think that gets lost in other music forms, particularly with pop music, particularly with other forms of music that are actually not about music. They're about other things, They're about other things. So it's really interesting, I find it really fascinating. So I can see on the master bus here, just getting back to this track, you've got good old L2 there from Waves.
Yeah.
And yeah, so is that your go-to limiter a lot of the time?
Yeah, L2. I don't know why I use L2 other than L3 or L1, but it just it's really clean and just makes it louder without doing anything else to it. So I just always I often get quite a lot of the way through a track, or like halfway through a track, where I mix as I go, for the most part, and then I just put a limiter on the end while I'm making it, just so everything is kind of as it would sound a bit. And then I just kind of flick it on and off as I'm making it, and I don't normally put too much else on the mixer. I might, at the moment, sometimes I put the Kramer tape saturation on there just to give it a little bit of warmth and crunch, and then not much else will go on the master, to be honest.
Okay, and I know you talked about making this in 2013. Is that still your process to this day? just using some of the L2 L3 with Kramer? Is that your master bus workflow to this day?
Yeah, because I kind of I do everything within the channels, and so like I don't even really do much bus mixing.
I was going to say, because I saw in your vocal, you had to, literally, reverb, tape delay on the insert.
Yeah, I often, normally I will have like effects sent to a bus, but in general, I wouldn't have all like my drums sent to a bus and then do them together. I kind of just do everything individually. I don't really know why. It's just the way I've always done it, and I guess I like to work on the minor details of each sound, and then so when I'm used to hearing them all that way, so then I don't really need to put that much else on the master. And apart from the Kramer, really is I like the noise. I turn the noise up on it, and just to give it a bit of something else. But yeah, I don't. Everything else is just on the channels.
Sure thing.
And
is there? Go on.
Soundtoy is my most recent purchase that I got at the end of last year that I've just used I've gone back on loads of tunes and just used their stuff on
the decapitator, etc.
And the radiator and everything. No,
awesome plugin suite. Is there a particular part of your track development that you find challenging, and if so, what are your usual techniques to overcome the challenge?
I'd say drums quite often, especially when I'm making a more melody-based stuff, melody-based music, because I think I have always tried to incorporate my love for melody with trying to make something for a dance floor, and they don't always necessarily go together because you have to strip a lot of it away to get the rhythmic elements to come through. And I think that's the struggle I've always had, is trying to balance my love for melody with my love for making people dance as well. Because I think initially when I was making some of these songs, this one in particular, I wasn't really playing out that much, and it was from doing Boxed that I learned how to be a club DJ. And I would always come, all the years up to this, I was of the thought that I could just be a producer, and then when you realize you actually want to start making some money from music, you can't
get out there. Get out there, son.
Exactly. Yeah. So then I learned. Well, I was DJing a few years before that, but I never necessarily wanted to be a DJ, and just doing Boxed and releasing my album and managing to tour around the world and stuff. It just really open my eyes to what different elements I can bring in to make people dance, and it's really made me realize that I kind of have to separate them a bit slightly with my melody, or I haven't found a way to make it fully work the way I would like it to work. I mean, there are definitely producers that can. I think the best way to do it is in a minimal way, and just a simple rolling bass line can make you feel like there's so much melody on the track when it's just one good melody riff. That's kind of the way I feel like I've learned at the moment to keep the melody.
Yeah, that's definitely a great idea. Or one idea might be to have a simple melody, as you said, but maybe the evolution of the sound is more with the filter. Do you know what I mean? Or with EQ rather than it being melodic. Do you know what I mean? Something like that.
Those are things I've learned as a DJ as well, just from watching others. Just like how I never realized how much people would go mad for you just to take out the lows. It's like, you bring it back in again and everyone's going crazy, and it's like, all right, that makes a big difference to people. So like, let me do that in my music as well then. Yeah.
So with your live going on tour, I get this, I hear that it's mostly you as a DJ playing your own music. I don't get this sense that it's Mr. Mitch live per se. Am I right?
Yeah, it's when I DJ, I kind of rarely even play my own music, to be honest. It's just that is when I DJ, it's just me as a DJ, and I think there's been a disconnect there for a little while where my stuff doesn't sound like the stuff that I DJ, and I think my new album that I've just finished and that will be coming out some point is probably the closest thing to a Mr. Mitch DJ set, where it might have elements of ambient kind of stuff in there, and then it also has more clubby stuff, but they're not necessarily, the way I blend them together is not necessarily the way you'd expect them to be blended together, and so like the album is very all over the place, but in a way that makes sense to me at least.
Yeah, of course. And I get the sense that I look forward to hearing it, by the way, but I really get the sense that you're DJing, that disconnect, you've almost brought them together on this album. Do you know what I mean? Your DJing has definitely influenced your composition, right, for this new album, as your interests in P dubs, more kind of ambient stuff, so I think it's going to be really interesting. So with that said, have you considered what going live will look like? Will there be a Mr. Mitch live?
I've tried over the years to make live sets, and Ableton seems like a great tool to do it. I've just never really got to grips with it. Every time I look at it and I'm just like, oh, this is learning something new all over again. It's just it feels really hard when it's, I don't know why, it's software. I think maybe if I can make my live set hardware, I think I would enjoy it more and I'd be less scared of things messing up. So I imagine if I did do a live show, it would be something, because I don't want to just play tracks. I've seen a lot of people's live sets and it's just literally them playing the songs again through Ableton, and I've done shows like that where they just kind of want me to do Mr. Mitch stuff, and I kind of DJ it, and I might have stems from different tracks, and I kind of use the CDJs as instruments almost, which is fun to do, but also weird because those are the kind of shows where everyone just stands there and it's really hard to figure out if people are enjoying it or not.
Sure.
So yeah, I think I'd be much more into doing a live set when it can be a bit more like a DJ set, where I can implement dance floor bits as well as the other stuff, because I can't stand there for an hour and not tell if you're liking it or not.
No, I can imagine it. But it's interesting because I think when it comes to live, there's definitely something about performing live, which is different to DJing. Do you know what I mean? I think, of course, you can have live sets that can go off. Of course you can. But I think there's definitely, it's almost like a chicken and egg situation, because I think with performing live, particularly the early part of a set, people are really curious to know what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? You're almost like they're entering your world. Do you know what I mean? And where you're going to go artistically. So I think that's something to remember, perhaps, and of course, depending on what direction you're going with your set, whether you take up a notch or you build the energy or whatever, and people obviously will dance. I think there's a lot more poetic license with performing live, I think, from my experience. But yeah, we look forward to when that happens. When's the album dropping?
Sometime at the end of this year, I think. It's done, it's made. I've just got to tie up some other bits with it, and yeah, I'm happy with it.
Good. Have you got a title yet, or is it too early days for you to?
It's got a title. Well, I can share it. It's called Lazy.
Perfect.
Yeah. So there'll be more info and all of that soon, eventually. But yeah, I'm looking forward to getting it out there.
Yeah, we're looking forward to listening to it too. So yeah, give us a shout nearer the time, then we'll be happy to support. That'd be awesome.
Cheers, appreciate that.
Yeah. Listen, this has been amazing, man. Thank you so much for this insight. So thank you all of you for tuning in with us. Keep in touch. We are on Facebook, CDR HQ, it's _CDR on Twitter, on Insta. Also the website cdr-projects.com. Mr. Mitch, where can we find you?
At Mr. Mitch Music on Twitter and Instagram, and on SoundCloud as well. All Mr. Mitch Music, pretty much.
Killer. Just Google Mr. Mitch and then we're all good, pretty much, right?
Done now.
Yeah, cool. So thank you again for tuning in. And if you're around at the weekend, this Saturday, August 22nd, we're putting together a program for the We Out Here Festival. Check us out online. Check out the CDR website for details. But until then, until we see you again, take care of yourself and stay safe.
Pick up.